I'm trying to come up.
Chris, turn around.
Yeah. Get out, we gotta go, we gotta start moving.
Habitat down there. We've had 5 men inside and working. I got to the 6-inch pipe there. And something went wrong with a plug inside the pipe. And it created a back pressure. And they get sucked in the pipe.
5 divers were sucked alive into an oil pipeline. Only one made it out. This is not a movie, this is real. They were trapped in oil in total darkness. Some prayed, others tapped, hoping someone would hear. Help was waiting above, but it never came. Because the people in charge said wait. And while they argued, the divers ran out of air. This is the LMCS pipeline tragedy. And at the end of this video, you'll see real footage from inside the pipe, the exact moment it happened. So let's reconstruct how it all began. February 25th, 2022, 5 divers descended 18 meters beneath the Gulf of Paria to a 30-inch oil pipeline lying 400 meters off Paria, a town in Trinidad and Tobago. Their mission was routine maintenance. What happens next turns a mundane job into a horror no one saw coming. These men were seasoned underwater welders working for the LMCS. Every one of them had years of experience, a reputation and attention to detail. There was Kazem Ali Jr., who was 36 years old, often seen as the unofficial leader. Calm under pressure, he'd worked these same Paria pipelines for years. He also happens to be the son of LMCS's managing director, Kazem Ali Sr. Then there's Faisal Kurban, the team's go-to expert for technical welding and maintenance, known for his steady hands and flawless precision. He was the veteran. And then there was Rishi Nagasar, 48 years old. He brought decades of experience in rise installations and knew the Paria seabed like the back of his hands. Yusuf Henry, he was 31 years old, the sharp one, excellent at gear checks and dive planning. His profile was nearly perfect, the kind of diver you wanted, double-checking your air. And then there was Christopher Boudreau, a seasoned commercial diver. Hyperbaric welding, pipeline work, underwater repairs. He's done it all. He was precise and calm, and often trusted with the riskiest jobs. He would become the only survivor, crawling for hours through black, sludgy water, holding on to nothing but grit and instinct. These men were to work in a habitat belt, which is a sealed chamber that provided a dry environment for the maintenance crew. The bell sat over a 30-inch pipeline stretching from berth 6 to berth 5, about 365 meters long. Water temperatures at the Gulf of Paria hover around 27 to 30 degrees, warm enough to skip your thermal suit, but inside the bell it was claustrophobic and humid, and so the men would enter the bell in full scuba gear, but once sealed and pressurized, they dekitted and removed their masks and their tanks, and this allowed them to work more freely in the dry chamber. 2 weeks earlier, Paria Fuel trading company, who had contracted LMCS for the pipeline maintenance, installed an inflatable plug inside the pipe. It was meant to isolate and protect the dormant line, keeping seawater out and preserving the oil inside. But that plug created a dead leg, a sealed, stagnant section of pipeline where fluids and pressure could build up if left unchecked. Jobs like this normally take days of preparation. Standard protocols require risk assessment, they require detailed planning, permits, and a full awareness of what's inside the pipe. But the company, Paria Fuel Trading, rushed this. Everything hinged on one barrier, the plug holding back the sea. And when it failed, the chamber became a death trap. For Chris Boudreau, that morning began like any other. prayer, then breakfast. He kissed his wife and his 3 kids goodbye. Then he drove towards Paria Fuel Trading Company around 5:30 a.m., ready for a long shift. Once he reached the site, Chris walked into the toolbox meeting room. Not standard. Before anyone steps into the habitat, there's always a safety meeting. No exceptions. All 5 divers were there that morning. They reviewed the day's tasks, the hazards, the roles. But one thing stood out, or rather didn't. No one mentioned Delta P, not once. No one flagged the deadly pressure differentials that can suck a man into the pipe faster than he can scream. But the task was clear. Remove a blank flange, which is a thick, heavy metal plate bolted over the pipe. Deflate the 2 inflatable plugs sealing off the line. Install a riser extension and bolt it into place. Each man knew his job, and so each man suited up. They dove into the sealed pressurized chamber, the habitat. And inside they could finally take off the heavy scuba gear. It was just them now, tools in hand, breathing mixed gas surrounded by thousands of liters of seawater, held back by nothing but steel and bolts and pressure. At exactly 2:43 p.m., Kazamali Jr. handed Chris a spanner. He gripped it tightly, moving towards the plug, and began loosening the valve. When the diver turned the spanner on the flange, it loosened the connection, holding back seawater at high pressure. Because the chamber behind the flange was at a much lower pressure, the moment the seal broke, water rushed in violently. This is the Delta P event, differential pressure. Now remember, the 4 men de-kitted inside the bell. They were not wearing masks or regs, only their wetsuits. They were in a dry, pressurized environment, preparing for maintenance work. They weren't suited up to survive a sudden inrush of water. When the Delta P struck, the force was immediate and overwhelming. Water didn't leak in, it exploded into the chamber, filling it within seconds. The speed and the volume of the inrush created a vacuum effect, sucking in all 5 divers, their tools, loose equipment, debris, everything. What you're now about to hear is the original audio, recorded from inside the pipe, paired with a reconstruction based on the pipe schematics. This is the moment the Delta P breach pulled them in. This video shows exactly how far they were dragged and where they got stuck. No one on the outside can truly grasp what it was like down there. Here's Chris Boudram's first-hand account of the moment the pipe flooded and their desperate fight to survive.
Kazemali Jr. came in and we tell him we needed a spanner. He went out, collect the spanner, bring it back in, give me the spanner, I give it to them, and as he come back in and I turn around, after I do that and I turn around, I even sure if I collect the spanner. After I turn around, I saw the water in the chamber start to rise, and I said, all that was going on here, look, this thing falling up, let me get out of here. And I jumped And when I jump to come out the habitat, I feel like instead of sinking in water, I feel like I was floating. It had no gravity. I feel like, and then after, within a second, it was like a tornado. Everything just spinning and beating you up, and it happened so fast that you couldn't react. The only thing I remember able to do was cover my head in the fetal position. After that, all I remember, I didn't even remember actually getting pulled in the pipe. I just remember going hurled through the pipe at unbelievable speeds. It feel like if you're driving a car and you're doing 100 or 120 on the highway, it feel like if you're going through that kind of speed. Every time I try, after I realize I'm in the pipe and I'm going through the pipe, every time I try to stop myself jamming the walls of the pipe, I would feel my hands burning through the wetsuit. While going down it, I feel a little debris hitting you. And we kind of stopped, and the water can slow down, and I was able to stop myself. At this time, I couldn't hold my breath no longer. My throat, when you're holding your breath for too long, after a while, your body, your lungs just fight to try to gas the breath. And when you're forcing your airways closed, you see a noise. But actually, that's why I was hearing. Your body suffering to pull air, and at that point I tell myself I was gonna dead. I say, God, I come in, ma, look out for me. I was expecting to be dead there, and all of a sudden I just out of the water and catch a breath. Was in a state of panic, realizing that alright, I need pipe. I just now nearly dead. I'm not sure if I'm alive. A matter of fact, I ain't sure where is if I'm in hell, if I'm in heaven, if I'm in a pipe.
Trapped inside the pipe, the men found themselves in total darkness. No sunlight, no clear exit, just thick, murky water all around. The air pocket was small and the pressure inside matched the depth, so it didn't collapse, but the air was limited, and every breath made it shrink. Their tools and gear lay scattered, tangled with the debris. The cold oil mixed with seawater coated everything, making every movement slippery and exhausting. As the chaos settled, Chris called out, his voice raw. One by one the others answered. Everyone was alive, but that relief was short-lived, and the full weight of the disaster hit him. Every man was injured, some badly. The nightmare was far from over. Yusuf's hand and foot were broken. Faisal was barely responsive, only able to weakly push himself forward. Kazem was in agony, crying out that he couldn't move. And Rishi was deeper in the pipe, injured and unconscious. And Chris had a dislocated shoulder and possibly cracked ribs. Every breath burnt and every movement felt like it would tear him apart. Chris knew that they couldn't crawl out individually, not like this. If they were going to survive, they'd have to move as a unit. So he took a moment to look around and assess where he was. At first he thought they'd plunged in head first, but Kazem, Yusuf and Faisal said they went in feet first, and he trusted them. So despite the pain in his arm and the burning in his chest, Chris pulled himself forward. He placed his feet on Kazem's shoulders and told him to grab the others. Faisal, who was at the rear, was told to push. They locked together like a human chain, Chris being in front, and began their crawl through the black, airless hell. The pipe was slick with oil residue. Every inch forward was torture. The darkness was so complete it felt solid. Their eyes burnt, their throats scorched. Some had broken bones. The pipe wasn't straight either, it curved unpredictably, forcing the men to twist and contort, scraping against rough edges with every movement. Progress was agonizing. Every breath felt borrowed. They prayed, crawled, hoped, and kept going. Eventually, they stumbled onto 2 air tanks with the regulators still attached. For a moment, it was a flicker of hope. But Chris, with his diving experience, warned against breathing them. They didn't know how much air was left in the tanks, and and using the tanks too soon could cause oxygen toxicity or waste precious air that they might desperately need later on. Instead, they decided to conserve the tanks for when the air pockets began to run out or the water level rose. They would take little breaths of air from the tank, just enough to fill their lungs with fresh air and help them move along. And then they'd save the rest. For the next few hours, the group stayed put. They were in total darkness, covered in oil, in pain, and slowly losing strength. Chris tried to keep everyone talking to maintain consciousness. He would later say the hardest part was hearing Kazim Jr. cry out in pain and not being able to help. They heard hammering above at some point, faint and distant, but there was hope. Chris tapped back, but got no response. No one came. And that silence crushed them harder than the noise lifted them. At some point, Chris realized the truth. No one was coming. The silence had stretched too long. Rescue clearly wasn't on the way, and the water levels were starting to rise. He made a decision to crawl out. He spoke to the others, told them he'd come back or send help. They begged him not to go. They wanted to stay together, to be rescued as a group. But Chris knew that if he stayed, they would all die. He grabbed one of the scuba tanks and shouted for Faisal to take the other and follow. Together they crawled into the mixture of seawater and oil, and then began swimming. Chris aimed for what he hoped was berth 6, the same direction that entered from. With every slow kick forward, the air in his tank got worse. He could taste it, thin, stale, dirty. The pressure was dropping fast. Then came the signs, the metallic tang, a hollow hiss, and silence. His tank was empty. He held his breath and kept swimming, lungs burning, and the tunnels stretched on. Each second dragged. Darkness closed in at the edges of his vision. His chest started seizing, diaphragm spasming. It hit hard. His body was screaming to inhale. But still, he pushed forward. But the longer he held out, the closer the blackout crept. And then he heard a clang. His tank collided with something. Another tank. It had a regulator, no mouthpiece. But he didn't care. Chris jammed the metal into his mouth. Oily sludge flooded in, gagging him. But there was air. Just enough, and so he kept on moving. Eventually he reached an air pocket, one of several scattered through the pipe. It gave him a brief moment to breathe and regroup. And that's when he heard a voice. Faisal was behind him, exhausted. He asked Chris to wait a few minutes so he could rest, but Chris couldn't stop. He was afraid that if he did, the adrenaline would wear off, and he'd never make it to the pipe's bend. He asked Faisal if his tank had any air left. Faisal said it did, and so Chris urged him to stay put, wait there, conserve air, and hold on. Chris knew the truth. If help didn't come soon, no one would survive. It was a brutal call, leaving a fellow diver behind, but he understood the stakes. He had to move, and so he pushed forward alone, crawling deeper into the dark, praying he'd make it before the time ran out. It was slow and agonizing. The pipeline was tight, barely enough room to move. His injured arm dragged behind him, the regulator slipping from his mouth again and again. He'd jam it back in, suck in that thick, oily air, and force himself on. Eventually, he reached what he believed was the last flooded section before the riser bend. He had no idea if this would lead him to safety or a dead end, and so he made one final push. Chris surfaced at the pipe riser. He found a chain and pulled himself up. Then he started backing. 30 minutes passed and nothing. Then someone screamed back, "He's alive!" There, 2 divers were waiting. Defying orders not to enter the water, they jumped in and managed to pull him back out to safety. On the surface, Chris immediately reported that the rest of the men were alive and that Faisal was not far behind. But no one moved. What Chris didn't know was the LMCS supervisor had told the crew that the pipeline was full of oil and debris and was blocked, and that any attempt to re-enter could be deadly. The diver who had rescued Chris had acted against those orders.
So extra help, nothing was done. One of the diver's son reached on the job site around 4:30 on Friday evening. That 2 hours after the accident. Nobody done nothing. He decided not to take it upon himself to call for backup divers. So he started call around for backup divers. I get the message around 5 o'clock. So I reach on the job site around 5:30. When we reach there now, the Paria representative telling us do not enter the water. They did not give us permission to go into the water. And the hearing a diver, at the time we was hearing a diver calling and knocking inside the pipeline.
So there were voices coming out of the pipeline?
Yeah, he was hearing a voice and he was knocking and knocking, and that knocking was he saying it loud.
So he was left there?
Yeah. The Paria representative tell us do not enter the water, do not enter the water. Right? But we discard that because we hearing our colleague calling.
So you went up and saved one?
Yeah. Me and our next diver, Corey,
went in the line?
Went in and we get one. We take out that one, Christopher Budram. We retrieve him, we bring him out. Together with them now, we going back with 3 divers now. Michael Kurban, Corey, and myself went back inside. We went as far as we could inside the line. Michael Kurban went in. We were breathing with a hose. He went as far as the hose could go. He had no more slack to give him. So he tried to retrieve his father. The diver Christopher told us that the next diver.
So one of the divers, his father is in there too?
Yes.
And he went
there. The diver retrieved, telling us the next diver was right there behind him. He was right there behind him. So he went down to see if he could get his father. After our next dive, he came with proper equipment, with longer hose to go inside the pipeline. When time we bunked us, you ready to go inside the pipeline, Paria come and stop us and said nobody to enter the water. They stop us from going to search for the diver. Right? And that was the time, that was the main time. Close to the, hours after it happened. They stop us from going to the pipeline.
On deck, LMCS relatives like Michael Kurban assembled rescue divers. They wanted to push in, but Paria's incident command system was slow. They delayed, they waited for drone footage, they calculated oxygen. The divers on site offered to dive in, but Paria refused every time, citing safety protocols and risk. Families of the divers sat in Paria's car park for days with little information and no support. Company statements came hours later, with no follow-up. Survivors learned of the deaths from TV news.
The other thing is that one of the divers was on top of the riser, which was tip to tail, banging on the pipe. Nobody after an hour, he banging an hour inside. Nobody to rescue him. Only when me and my divers came, we rescued him. When we rescued him, he told me my father is right behind him. Go down for your father. It took me about 15 minutes to organize my gear to go down on the pipe. I swim down in the pipe about 70 feet down. I did not locate him. I located his dive trap. I tried to swim as far as I could. I did not locate him. After we came back up, we told them that we didn't find nobody else. So we had to try a different alternative. When we came back, the manager, so-called manager, said, do not dive into the pipeline again. And I asked, who is the manager? Say that. Nobody didn't want to say the name. But I would say the name because this man, Colin Piper. Colin Piper. Close. Yeah. Right? Tell my men not to dive the pipeline again. Right? Then again, they bring the professional dive boat, Subsea Global, to use the commercial equipment, which was the right thing. But that was hours after. We still had time to save them, guys. Still had time. But you know what the orders they get? The orders they get was to plug the flange and block the divers from surfacing back up where we rescue the first man. Why would you give an order like that and block the only entrance the fellas know to surface for help? Right? And I told them, do not block it. Let me send a commercial diver down with the proper lifeline and let me rescue them, guys. Again, the managers is the ones. Them is the dive experts. Them is the dive expert here. I don't know what kind of brain cells this man have. Right? We was doing the right thing. Right? We was doing the right thing. They told the commercial divers and the fellas work and plug and close the flange. How could you close an entrance where the men could possibly raise and survive, where we could dive and rescue them? You shouldn't do that. Right? All this bullshit, all this talk you're talking in the press conference. Try not to cover up your tracks, partner. Because you're not covering up your tracks. Right? You're not covering up your tracks. You are a murderer in my eyes. Yes! Yes! Murderer in my eyes, partner.
Audio from the recovered GoPro reveals that they were alive in the air pocket. They prayed, they consoled each other, but no coordinated rescue emerged. Paria even capped the pipe ends, trapping them deeper. After days, when survival seemed impossible, Paria ordered the pipelines flushed, pushing the bodies out and destroying air bubbles, possibly killing any chance of life. The government's 380-page commission inquiry found both Paria and LMCS culpable. Paria faced recommended corporate manslaughter charges. LMCS escaped harsher penalties because Paria blocked their rescue attempt. Under the OSHA Act, Paria executives were charged with failing to plan, supervise, and carry out rescues. The tragedy was defined by silence, inaction, and negligence. 4 men died. Rescue was possible but denied. Protocols overrode lives. Would you dive knowing safety valves might fail? Trust a company that watches men suffocate. If safety is optional, tragedy is inevitable. Disasters like this don't start underwater. They start in boardrooms, in silence, and in ignored warnings.
At this stage, I still not sure if we're going in the correct direction.
Right.
I still not sure if I go and swim to boat 5 and bounce up a blank, or if I swim further away from the rescue, because everything inside me open a rescue, you know? Everything inside me open a rescue was going on. Nobody was making an attempt to rescue me. You know what I mean? Sorry. I understand that. I'm not sure how far this water going. And I don't tell myself I may not come back from the swim. But I had to know, I had to try. Because staying here is just as good as dying. And it don't make sense I should stay one place and die.
Yeah. Ahí, no. Huh? I'm 35 too. I'm trying to come up. Yeah. Get out, we gotta go, we gotta start moving. Who is that boy there? Yusuf? Oh, Yusuf? How long you have to walk before you meet Friday? You and Friday was together all the time? Who else with you? Can't for you? Right there where? Can't everything alright with you? No. Any LMs break? Your leg, alright. Five. Anything happen to you? A five? Yusuf, anything happen to you? Yeah, boy. What happened? Alright.
Hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories from the deep.